Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turning Point. I'm your host, Blaine Birch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun cash flow forecasting software. And joining me today, I'm really excited to have Bradley Hamner, founder and CEO of Blueprint OS. And I know you help businesses figure out the systems in their business and obviously improve their state of affairs. But before we dive into what you're doing today, I actually want to find out, how did you get started as an entrepreneur? Like, what was your first sort of toe dipped into the pool?
I think it was from my dad. My dad's a small business owner. He wouldn't necessarily even probably to this day categorize himself as an entrepreneur. He would say he's a farmer. But they do, about $5 million in revenue or so. At the time, years ago when I was growing up, they were farming, close to 10,000 acres at one
Wow.
point. And so, I really think that was subtle, that I was ultimately going to try to do something in business. But, I don't have I did some lemonade stands and wash cars and things like that, but I didn't have the classic entrepreneur. Like, I knew that's what I was going to do. I think I just kind of saw it with my dad a little bit. And so and we'll get in a little bit more into that at some point, I'm sure. But a lot of the things were caught, not taught. My dad did not push me into business and in agriculture. In fact, I was really not able to do really much in that business because of allergies that I had. And, that wasn't really going to be my destiny to do that. But I really do think ultimately it was just through watching my dad mostly.
Yeah. Oh, and that's a really substantial business. I know I have family that are farmers and have been for generations, and it is funny because it's like, well, yeah, I'm a farmer, and that's a business. It's
Oh, yeah.
through and through a business, and it's got a lot of challenges that far exceed what a lot of other businesses face because of from obviously from weather and the quality of the crops, the quality of the yield for a year and everything. So, yeah, very challenging. So it's interesting, I think, to see that kind of firsthand.
Yeah.
So where did you, so I know you obviously like that wasn't sort of in your future. So where did you go? What did you do for schooling? How did you sort of, take that step out on your own?
Well, initially I was going to, do pre-law, and then I decided that no, I'm not going to really do that. And so I had a family member that was in sales, in particular in pharmaceutical sales. So when I graduated from Auburn University, I ended up getting into selling. I sold Yellow Page ads, was my very first job out of college, which looking back on it was absolutely fantastic. I did that for a little over a year, got into pharmaceutical sales, which I think is a huge part again of my story. So there's two kind of aspects. When I started my business, I opened officially in January 1st, 2010 is when we opened. I had done some getting ready to open in 2009. So I left the corporate world really early 2009, and then used that entire year to kind of get ready to open the business. And so I had really two main things. One is through my dad, I saw what it actually meant to work hard. I mean, in that business,
Mhm.
sounds like that, in farmers, you just have to bust it. And
Yeah.
so, that meant 7 days a week in the field from planting season, harvest season, but then all the other time. And they even have a seed conditioning cleaning business. So other farmers bring their crops to them
Mm.
to clean and bag, et cetera. So there's really two parts of that business. So my dad worked all the time. And
Mhm.
so I really picked up the value of hard work. And I'm still so grateful to see that, because he showed me actually what it takes in
Yeah.
business. The second, though, was my first jobs being in sales.
Mhm.
Really, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed selling. I enjoyed talking. I enjoyed landing the deals. I enjoyed making the sales. And so learning how to sell, how to connect, how to network, how to talk to people, and then how to work hard were the two real skill sets that I had. I got my
Yeah.
degree in finance from Auburn, but I truthfully, I didn't know how to do anything in the business like financials, like zero. Okay. It's
Yeah.
embarrassing, but I tell people this is not an indictment on Auburn. It's really more on me. I knew how to calculate the net present value of Harley Davidson stock, but I sure as heck didn't know how to balance or what my own income statement was or balance sheet was. I was
Yeah.
using the first 2 years in my business, I was using Quicken. And my accountant was like, hey, need to get you on QuickBooks. And I was like, what's the difference? You know, I was like, what does it really matter? I mean, that's how, like,
Yeah.
really and truly, my dad did not teach me like these small business things of how to do business. And I went to university. So like I had all of these things, parents and a small business owner, got my degree in a business degree. Like I had advantages that I should have been able to take more advantage of, but I didn't. I just knew how to work hard and how to sell. And that was the thing that really got the business off the ground. It was in the insurance industry. That's exactly what it needed to be, Blaine. Like that was good enough and it worked beautifully up until it didn't work anymore.
Yeah. That's, see it every day, and probably more now than we've seen in the last couple of decades, actually. And it's it's interesting because I've talked with so many founders, and there's always these sort of common threads through, and one of them is it's real hard to be an entrepreneur if you can't sell. Like, it is just a skill, and like you mentioned, it's not necessarily going door to door and knocking on doors and selling something, which I've done. When I was, that sort of university age, but like you said, it's the how to network, but networking isn't just shaking hands. It's developing relationships and nurturing those relationships and helping other people and vice versa, and building up this network that is something that you can rely on and actually can drive sales to you, is so incredibly important. And then it's also just the hustle. Like you mentioned, it's just straight up hustle and entrepreneurs. Like I know even for me, like I get up in the morning and I sprint through the day, and, there's at the end of the day, I shut off my computer, but my brain doesn't shut off. You can't, it's almost impossible. It's the hardest thing is to shut the brain off from kind of working all the time. Right. And it's just something I think that as entrepreneurs we're maybe born with a little bit. But I'm interested because I most of the founders that I talk with didn't have any finance background at all when they came out of university, or college or tech school or whatever, wherever they came from. They were generally domain experts in some area. Like myself, I started, my first business was a creative agency. I started because I took a design degree, and that was how I got sort of going. And I learned finance. Fortunately, I think I had a bit of an intuitive understanding of it, but I learned the technical parts of it by the seat of my pants, like a lot of entrepreneurs. Like you said, there's a big difference when it comes down to something completely operational. But I do want to dive in. Like, I know you kind of mentioned it worked until it didn't, but let's get back to like starting that business and what was it, and how, and when it did work, what was the first part of that? How did you get that going, and what was happening there?
Well, the first few years in that business, I was the top salesperson. So I totally agree with you that knowing how to sell, having sales skills, learning how to use, your voice inflection, learning how to connect with people, build rapport with people, get people to trust you, learning how to listen, learning how to, there's a tremendous amount of sales skills, and there's a lot of other great people that know how to teach those individual sales skills far better than I do. What I think, though, is the difference is that I was the top producer in that business for the first 5 years of that company, which sounds great, but that does not scale a company. And so me having those sales skills, okay, that's good. Yeah, I needed to know how to do that. I completely agree. But then teaching other people how to do or to do what I was doing. I've heard Dan Martell say this, that, 80% done by someone else is 100% awesome. Yeah, well, I didn't believe that at the time. I didn't, I didn't have that vernacular. And so I was like, you know what, if it's going to get done, we're going to hit our numbers. I'll just do it. I'll just strap on. I'll hit the numbers. Team's going to leave at 5, but I'll stay till 8:00. I remember driving down the road, sitting in the passenger seat, going on a family vacation, and I'm calling people and making sales for 6 hours on the way to the beach because it was like, well, this is what it takes. And I'm not saying that in the early days it maybe isn't. I mean, that's fine. To get a business off the ground, to initially give that business some life, I agree. But at some point, that has to change if you really want to grow, really, truly grow the company, let alone scale the company. It cannot be dependent upon you, because you'll end up doing what I did. I ran out of time. There was not enough time. If I'm burning it pretty much 7 days a week, I've given up, my hobbies, sacrificing family time, etc., and I'm working all the time, and there's not enough time in the day at some point. And that's why I say it worked until it didn't anymore. Goldsmith says, what got you here is not going to get you there. But it took an actual, at the time I thought was a health scare to wake me up. And so, to get me to change, because I thought I was having some heart issues. I was working out in the morning, and ended up going and seeing a physician that morning, and he ended up sending me on to a cardiologist. Well, now I'm in a full-blown panic. I didn't realize at the time that that's what I was having, was panic attacks. And so the cardiologist said, look, there's nothing wrong with your heart at 34 years old, but I don't know what you got going on in your life, but you might want to change it. And, but Blaine, I didn't know what that was going to be. I mean, when the only lever you have is to work hard and sell, basically, then what do you have left to turn to when you don't really know the other way to do it? And so that's a big part of kind of my journey.
It's such a familiar story. I felt almost all the same things you have, and I've gone through a lot of the same things you have, and basically the same sort of health scare that started to set me straight, because I was, burning the candle at both ends and in the middle, and like just way too much, and at some point I had to sit back and go, no, I got to cut a bunch of this stuff free. I've got to focus on what's really important. I've got to bring people in that can do what they need to do, and bring in some discipline into our business that was, we tried to do very much a 9 to 5, and our team and ourselves were off and had time to decompress and make sure that it was healthy and long-term, because, the lesson learned there is you can hustle for a while, but running a business is not even a marathon. It's like hiking around the globe. You can't sprint forever.
No, that's
you
right.
just can't. You have to have a pace. And so that's so a lot of discipline that I've brought in is like when the bell starts in the morning till the bell ends at night, I'm going and I'm sprinting and I'm efficient. But I try and, I don't have an exact cutoff at the end of the day, but I try and be reasonable, right? And take that time so that my you can rest your mind, your body, your team can as well. And I'm convinced that we are infinitely more productive that way. So when I hear entrepreneurs saying, "Oh, I work 70 hours a week," and I'm thinking, yeah, if you worked efficiently, you could probably do it in 40, because there's no way you can keep a pace up indefinitely at that number of hours and still be efficient. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. And in fact, that's actually the efficiency, the operational efficiency is effectively really the benefit. We like to say that, once you design, build, and install an operating system that allows the business to run more efficient, it will run like a well-oiled machine. And what I had was a hand crank. Okay. I had a hand crank machine. As long as Bradley was in there cranking that business, then it would go. But eventually, dadgum, that gets exhausting. That gets exhausting to do that. And then furthermore, I was like, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I thought this was going to be. Okay.
Yeah.
This is not what I thought this was going to be. As a matter of fact, so when I had that health scare, that was in actually literally late July, right around this time, 2015. This was 9 years ago. So when that happened, I basically was like, well, I got 3 options here. And it wasn't as clear as I'm about to make it, but it really was this, like, well, I cannot keep doing what I'm doing, but I do not know what the other alternative is. So
Yeah.
then I said, well, you know what? I'm just going to leave. I'm actually just going to shut the business down. I could go back into the corporate world, make a couple $100,000 salary, 401k, company car, benefits, the whole 9 yards. And I strongly considered that one. I really did. I would have been making more money personally doing
Mhm.
that, and I would have had not had the stress. But I was did athletics my whole year, my whole life, and that's a big part. I was like, no, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit yet, but I got to do something. I got to do something different. I just didn't know what the different was going to be. I mean, again,
Yeah.
when the only thing you know is to do it one way, that you're like, okay, something's got to change. I just don't know what the change has got to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a challenge to pinpoint that when you're so close to it, like it's, forest through the trees type thing. Like you just, um, lots of times I think people outside of it, family, friends, everyone can see it better than you can when you're underwater. Right. But it's those times that force you to sit back and take a look and maybe get a bit of an understanding, like what's
Yeah.
going on and how do I change this? How do I make some progress forward? And it's because you're right. Like businesses, they they shouldn't be wringing entrepreneurs dry and spitting them out. Like there's got to be a way that you can do both. Run a successful business and have that, like they always say, that work-life balance. Have that ability to do things that matter outside of work, right?
Yeah. I, yeah, I definitely think as an entrepreneur, it's integration. It really is about how do we blend the two, because at the end of the day, I mean, I heard Michael Hyatt talk about, the double win. I want to, succeed at work and in life, for sure. But, like, how do you actually do that? Because then if I just take my foot off the gas pedal and then just go, oh, whatever, I'm not going to care about our results. I'm not going to care about our growth. I'm like, that's actually not going to be truthful to who I am either. That's just not
Mm-hmm.
how I am. I'm a hard driving, like, I want to win. I
Yeah.
want to win. I
Yeah.
want to feel like I'm winning. I don't feel like I'm winning. I have this health concern, sacrificing all this time for the family. Well, that's not working. So it's like I felt like I was losing in every way, shape, form, or fashion. And the reality is,
Mm-hmm.
look, we get into business. I mean, by and large, now how we get into business probably a little bit different, but like why we get into business, like freedom, flexibility, income potential. Like, let's be real. We want to get
Mm-hmm.
into it because we can make as much or more money being an entrepreneur than we can working for somebody else. I
Mm-hmm.
want the freedom and the flexibility. When this podcast is over, I'm going to have lunch with a friend and then I'm going to play golf. It's on a Friday, and
Yep.
I'm not telling somebody that. That's just what I'm going to do. And
Yep.
so I wanted to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it with who I wanted to do it with, and have the money to do so. But then the
Mm-hmm.
business felt anything but that. That's
Yep.
why I wanted these things. But my experience of what I was going through was anything but that. And so that's whenever you get to a place where it's like, I'm going to burn it all down. I'm going to burn it all down because something has to fundamentally change. And the last part I'll say about that is, and this gets into like, okay, well then what was the turning point, so to speak? But um, you know, because I am fairly, and sounds like you are as well, and I know many of your listeners are classic entrepreneurs, we get into it for freedom and flexibility. That when we hear discipline, structure, routine, process, systems, these kind of things, that can feel very rigid. Like,
Yeah.
whoa, wait a minute now. I don't want that. I don't want that. Yet the team and the business is silently screaming for that. That's what the business is saying that it needs. That's what the
Mm-hmm.
team is begging for. But there's this dilemma that happens that we have to go through to say, like, well, wait a minute. Everything I want is actually on the other side of structure, process, and routine.
Yeah. It's it's a bit of it's like a butting of heads almost, right? Because like I always say, a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like, I don't know, it's a bunch of cowboys mixed with squirrels. Like it's just like that's how they're jumping around and freedom. Um, but I know that like when with my creative agency, we were ticking along pretty good. It was funny because it felt like everyone said it takes 5 years to build a business. I'm like, yeah, no, we're good. We're making money right out of the gate. 5 years in, it's like, oh yeah, we got a real business now. Like they've got stuff, And then when the recession hit around 2008, 2009, it was the next big sort of crisis point for us, and that's I think where I ditched a lot of all these extra things that were sort of weighing us down, and we started to bring in systems and processes. And I
Hmm.
started to have a really close look because we had to survive on our cash flow, our sales pipeline, our profitability, our like everything that we just kind of took almost for granted.
Hmm.
And that experience is what led me later on to start Dryrun, because I realized it brought those systems and processes actually sort of calmed everything down, um, got us sort of on pace. And what it did is it allowed us to get more interesting projects, and they were more profitable. And in the end, it was like, we got a chance to be more creative and do some really interesting things because the business is taken care of. Like we're running it better, right? And so it was, it was kind of an experience that we had to go through. And I think there's a lot of businesses out there right now, if they're going to survive, are going to have to go through the same thing. It's like, it doesn't really matter what might have worked before. You gotta get down to some of the details, systems, and processes now to be able to survive. But if you survive this and come out the other side, you're going to be 10 times stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. A few months after that health scare, I really don't remember much about that period of time other than I was, you know, probably trying to take care of myself a little bit better. But I ended up actually in Toronto at Strategic Coach with in Dan Sullivan's program, and I was sitting next to a guy. I was actually in a different class than I was normally in at the time. And I'm sitting next to a guy, and we're doing the 10x is easier than 2x exercise, which has now been portrayed in the book that he wrote with Dr. Ben Hardy. But we're doing that exercise, and this guy I'm next to says, "Well, last year we did 40 million top line. I made 5 million personally. So here's what 400 million and 50 million would look like." And I was like, "To what?" Now you got to remember, I'd been before that. Nobody I was in the circle I was in, and nobody was willing to talk about revenue, profitability, and personal income that open. So
Mm-hmm.
for him to do it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?" And he did it in a very nonchalant way. He wasn't bragging. He was just like, "Here's the numbers, and this is what it would be." And then he said something that I'd heard for years, and I said something snarky back to him, and he said, "Look, Bradley, it's just systems and processes." I said, "Man, I have heard that for so long. I am so tired of hearing it, and nobody ever shares with me what that's actually like." It's almost like there's the Wizard of Oz, like something's behind the curtain, and I want to look behind the curtain because nobody ever shares with me how to do that. I hear that,
Yeah.
but like, what does that actually look like? And he said, "Well, at lunch, I'll show you." And so he did. And that's the moment that everything changed, because fundamentally I saw like, oh, I see what you're talking about now. They were beautifully designed documents. You could tell that the team was in them. I could understand them. He was like a financial advisor at the time. And then he built a firm being a financial advisor, actually based out of Canada. I don't recall where exactly. And so that was the moment fundamentally that changed everything, because I
Mm-hmm.
finally saw that's actually what it takes. And he said, "Bradley, I got my business out of my head. That's it." And so the thing back earlier when you were talking about sales skills, yes, I had the sales skills. I just didn't, it was all up here. I could
Mm-hmm.
not, even if I did, Blaine, and I did at times. It's not like I didn't hire salespeople and didn't try to train them. I mean, I did, right? I mean, I tried.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is that I would train Blaine. Blaine would come in. 6 months later, Blaine would leave, or a year later, Blaine would leave. And then there goes all of that intellectual property right out the door. So then
Mm-hmm.
guess what I got to do again? I got to do it again. And then I got to do it again. and you got to do it again. And then as people leave, come and go for different reasons, right? I let them go, they leave, or maybe they move. I mean, things happen.
Mhm.
You're just losing all that intellectual property every time, and nothing was ever documented. And finally, in that moment, I actually saw that's what it takes.
Mhm. So that you have this sort of fundamental aha moment, I'll say, right? And a lot of times, it's like, okay, you can take that moment and do you run with it? And a lot of times it starts to fade. How did you take that and actually move it forward? What did you do in that business that I guess like operationalized what you had learned?
Well, for the first time I legitimately got back, I think even on the plane ride home, I pulled up Word document and actually started to write down like, okay, now what do we do? What do we do?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that started to bring to the forefront is that all over my desktop and all over our shared drive were a bunch of assets that had no organization whatsoever. So it was like a scavenger hunt. Everybody's looking for stuff. So I didn't have a forcing function to actually organize all of the assets that we had. So the very first thing that I actually started to do was like, well, you know what? Instead of me creating more documents, why don't I just organize the ones I got? And that sounds so simplistic, but that's the kind of stuff that really and truly that I started to do. I've got to put these in some big buckets into some folders, because if you went to our shared drive, there were 72 plus folders and everything was just randomly because everybody was creating documents that based on what they thought was best. There was no uniformity between how the documents looked. Somebody in the office loved to use this color. I used this color. I like documents to look like this. There was no organization, no standardization of how documents needed to look, let alone actually how to create an actual process. Like, how do you actually do it? What is a good one? What does a good one actually look like? So the first thing I did, I started to try to create new documents. And then I was like, wait a minute. Okay. I think I created one. I was like, now where do I put the thing?
Yeah.
And so then I was like, okay, wait a minute. I actually got to start organizing these things. And so it took like a year or so before I started to kind of figure out like, okay, wait a minute, let's lump these together. Let's lump these together. And I did not know it at the time, but what I was creating was really an operating system. I was really creating a way of organizing all of the documents in the office. Then I got into, okay, well, what are the key things that we actually need to document? Because then I went down the path of, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to document everything. Everything we do, we're going to document. Well, that proved to be a waste of time. So see, all of this journey that I went through was like, okay, wait a minute. How do you organize it? How do you actually do it? What do the documents need to look like? And then what do you actually start to document? And so anyway, those are the problems I saw for myself. People started to see the change in our business. Hey, what are you doing? And then I started kind of helping some people one-on-one, and then kind of the rest is history. And that's what we do with Blueprint OS now.
It's you talk about a couple things that I think are some of the biggest challenges. One is, how do you just get started? Like, how do you take first step? Because it can feel like you're boiling the ocean, right? And the other problem was kind of, where does it end? Like, how do you keep it focused and effective? And where are you just burning up time? And it's the law of diminishing returns, right? And it's, I kind of see what you're doing, because I felt that, like I said, we sort of came up with our own systems and processes. I can think back, and I can even think about how we brought in systems to truly understand our efficiency, our productivity, our profitability from project to project. We were estimating them properly. We were managing them from start to finish properly, from deadlines, but all the way through, especially to deliverables and how much time we were putting in and everything else. And we had a way to analyze the end result, and was it profitable? And this, for a creative agency with a bunch of creatives, seems like, from the outside, seems like just death, right? Like, creatives really don't want to deal with that stuff. But it completely transformed our business, because all the scattered fly by seat of pants was suddenly like that's gone, which means that it's like, yeah, we're taking a little bit of time and really nailing this down, and that makes the business tick along better, the projects go smoother, and it actually frees everybody up.
Yeah.
And so those are things that, like, obviously moving forward into Dryrun, we started to really look at the finance side, the forecasting side, cash flow, sales pipeline, scenarios, all that kind of stuff, because the types of business we had, just by its nature, had lumpy cash flow and lumpy sales cycles, and
Hmm.
that makes it challenging and risky.
Yeah.
And so that's what we set out to solve. But there's a whole bunch of other layers that we built into that business that are a lot of them are into Dryrun today, from the back end on how we run the business. And it's like you said, it's all systems, it's all processes. And the better we do on that, the more time we have to focus on what we think is, really important, right?
That's so true. You're talking about, as with creatives, I don't know necessarily that every entrepreneur is a creative, but I think that there's a similar vein that we all have around, we want to go and create, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
like I don't have a great design eye. It's like I like this, don't like this, but I don't think I could actually do some of that creative. Um, so I agree, and I think that, again, it goes back to what I said before: is that I used to think it would be like this rigidity, that what I that's how I thought it would be, was going to stifle some of my gifts as an entrepreneur, to think big, have a big vision of where the business is going to go, create a plan to make it happen. And so I think that, and even my enthusiasm, et cetera, is like, oh, I don't want to be pinned in a box. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
be in this box. And so that was just a false narrative that I was telling myself, is that actually, no, 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 Bradley, it's quite the opposite. Is that if the business is really running on an OS, like it actually exists in an OS outside of you. Matter of fact, some language that we use is that we we say, actually, your business is running on an OS right now. It's just a UOS. It's a
Mm-hmm.
UOS. And so we say, you actually need to upgrade your operating system. You got to go from like Windows 95 to, you might need to be upgrading to the latest Microsoft or Mac operating system is going to run a lot more efficiently than the old one that you're on. And I think the same thing is really true for the business. It's got to upgrade from a U operating system to a blueprint operating system. And so when people see that, it's like, okay, yeah, it is actually running on something. It's just running on me, basically. Everything is
Mm-hmm.
dependent upon me. It's a hand crank of a business. If I can actually get it out, and with the team's help, we can actually have something that exists outside of me. Now that thing is not dependent upon me, because let's be real, we are not well-oiled machines. We're not
Mm-hmm.
well-oiled machines, but we can architect that in the business.
Well, and I think, like, once you understand that what the gaps are and you have a system in place, that also means you can hire the right people.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to do that beforehand. Like early in creative agency days, I think, it's like, well, what do we need to build stuff? Oh, I need another designer. I need another developer. I need a photographer. It was all deliverables almost, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then later on, when we had some systems in place, it was like, yeah, the most important person we hired was a project manager who was not creative at all, but kept everybody in line,
Yeah.
including me.
Yeah.
But we had the systems in place. But then once she came in, it was like, okay, how do we further develop these? How do we take her expertise and her experience and start to go, okay, well, now we can really improve these systems and processes. And again, it gets further and further away from me doing everything, and sort of freeing my time up. And we never did really tackle, I think, the way to scale up sales in that business before I sold it. That's a challenge. And that's always a challenge. Like, we weren't selling a widget, you're selling a solution that's unique every time. And it's really hard to have somebody that's not the innovator I guess, for to be able to sell that. And that's always, I have friends, of course, still have agencies, and it's always a bottleneck with them, a challenge to sell something so custom and creative. It can be a challenge,
Yeah.
but at least we get to free up everything else, right?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I've got a client that I've been working with them since 2019, and they just hit the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies. And they're an agency. They're a marketing agency, and they basically they have a salesperson of one, and it's a co-founder of the business. It's actually the wife of the owner of that business.
Mhm.
The main founder, there's three owners of it now, but the main founder is really kind of the visionary. He's more the product person, so to speak, and they've productized it, which has been great. But they're now building. We just did a vision day with them a few weeks ago, and so we're building to sell. They're going to exit that company, and one of the things, to your point, that once we got a clear vision of what we wanted to achieve, once we had that in place, well, then we started to look at what are the things that need to be de-risked in the business. Well, one of them is, well, nobody's going to buy this business whenever the sales is basically dependent upon one of the co-founders of that business.
Yep.
And so then, okay, what are the specific steps we need to take this quarter, Q3 of 2024, to actually start to get sales documented and exist outside of this one person? And they've taken some great steps already in basically 3 weeks to do that. Because to your point, if you can't be able to teach it to other people, an acquirer is going to look at that and say, well, unless it's going to be an acqui-hire where we're hiring her to come with us, this business, the sales velocity, there isn't really any at that point. They can acquire the customers, which is, there's value there for sure. But what about additional sales velocity? And so that's some of the, to your point. Yeah, that's absolutely some of the things. And I'll say this, like a lot of our clients don't have the current desire to exit, okay, their company. Like they're doing it to grow cash flow. They want to make more personally. So they really want to be able to have an asset that is going to, like a more of a lifestyle business that allows them to go play golf and allows them to, work 20 to 30 hours a week or so and do the things in the business that they love, and, go fishing, go traveling, go, to concerts, whatever the thing may be. And not feel like it's on their head all the time. That's what the majority of our clients really want to do. But even if you don't want to sell, you can speak to this. Even if you don't want to sell, the same thing that an acquirer would find valuable in the business is the exact same thing that's going to get you everything that you really want in the business too. So even if you don't want to sell until like way down the line, still thinking of it that way is a really good mental model to hold.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand. If you want to free yourself up from the business for your time, it's also the same thing that'll free you from a business that someone could buy, right? Like
Totally.
it's there are like it's good that like that company you're just talking about that's scaling so fast. They identify like what is the issue and how do we do it, and documenting it, and again, like that also helps to figure out, okay, well, who do we need? Like if we're going to bring salespeople in, it's got to be the right salesperson. And once you've documented that process and you really truly understand it, it just helps you go, yeah, this is the meta that we need for the salesperson that's going to work effectively in our business compared to this other business, right? It can't just be, they've been around selling for 20 years, so good. Now you got to really truly understand your customer, the needs, what moves the deals forward, and that documenting is, like you said, it's the first step to truly understanding it, right?
Yeah, it 100% is. It's documenting it, and then it's organization. It's organization. I mean, I don't know if this is the best analogy, but it seems to resonate with people, is that if you do your laundry and you go put clothes in the washer and then you put them in the dryer and then you take them out of the dryer Okay, well, most people are going to fold them either in the laundry room if you have a space to do that, or you're going to take them to the bedroom, you're going to dump them on the bed. Okay. Those clothes are the documents that you have on your computer, the digital assets that you have. Would it ever make any sense for you to go to those clothes and just start randomly throwing them under the kitchen sink, in the garage, out on the front porch, on the back porch, in the kids' playroom area, where your library is, where your books are, like you've got some books behind you, and I'm just going to take my jeans and throw them up there. Clearly, you would never do that, right? Yet,
I know some of them probably would, but no names mentioned.
You what?
I know some of them probably would do that, but no names will be mentioned.
Okay, well, let's not call somebody out on that.
Yeah.
And so that wouldn't make any sense to do that. Why?
Yeah.
Because when we go to get dressed that evening, the next day, the next morning, and you say, wait a minute, where are my jeans? Where are my socks? You're going to go to the sock drawer. You're going to go where you put your jeans. You're going to go where your t-shirts are. You're going to go where your golf shirts are. When I went to go find my shorts and golf shirt today to go play golf later, I went to the place where they would be. It's the exact same thing is important, not just for you, but for your team. They know where to look. They know where to go. They know where to approach it. That reduces or eliminates, hopefully, the scavenger hunts in the business and allows you to have operational efficiency. And if you can have that, then you can actually be able to scale the company. One other analogy, I try to give analogies mostly because I think it helps me make sense of business. But did you watch Top Gun, Maverick, the new one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's not like I've seen it like 6 times. Okay. Yeah. You know the part in the first part of the movie where he's got that new fancy plane and he gets it to Mach 10 and then he's like a little bit more and then the thing blows up. That's the only part of that movie, by the way. I think they could have done a different way. It's like, come on, that's not reasonable. He's going Mach 10 and it blows up and he's okay. Like, come on. Other than that movie was incredible. But that is a very good example that if we want to really scale our business, like we really want to go and scale the company, we're at 1 million. I'm going to go take it to 3 and then we're going to take it to 10. Okay. Well, then the business really needs to be set up to handle that type of speed. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's going to implode. It's going to blow up. Or it's just never going to get there. You're going to keep pushing the gas and it's going to go one speed. It's just not going to get there. Does that land?
Yeah. Well, it does. And like we know, and we've been talking with a lot of our customers that scaling can be one of the most dangerous times for a business. Like fast growth can be really dangerous for a business because if they don't have the systems in place, they don't have the capital that they need. They don't there's a lot of moving parts because a lot is new, right? A lot of times you can think, well, this is the healthiest thing, grow fast. It can be a challenge. And so you have to do it right. Otherwise you can put it at risk.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Not pretty much every client that I've worked with are bootstrapped entrepreneurs. So I have not worked with, I have one client that kicked around the idea of raising capital one time, right? For a brief period. Mm-hmm. I say that to say, I know the bootstrapped area. And the reason I say that is because when you're bootstrapped, you have to balance growth and profitability. Mm-hmm. And the more you want to grow, you know this with what you guys do with Dryrun, that the more you want to grow or the faster you want to grow, the faster. It's really not the more you want to grow, because if I said you want to grow, you want to double in 25 years, of course, well, that's not super fast growth. But if you really want to grow fast, it has a downward pressure on profit. It just has a downward pressure on profit. And so I used to think that growth equaled profit versus growth eating profit. I didn't understand that. And so we have like a framework that we share with people, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. You might call it something else, but called the Rule of 40. So looking at year over year, looking at your profit percentage plus your year over year growth needs to equal 40 or more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that approach to say, hey, are we balancing? Are we still growing? And are we still profitable? Okay, so let's say the market conditions are right. In the U.S., we're coming up on a presidential election, so there's, who knows what that's going to happen in different industries, right? Some industries may be like, okay, like this is gung ho. Some industries may say, hey, it's a little, uncertain right now. Let's just say though that it's going to be a good time. It's going to be 2025 could be a great year. You say, you know what? We really think we can grow 30%. Well, that's probably likely going to have a downward pressure on your profitability. And as long as that's intentional and strategic, great. That's totally fine.
Yep.
What happens though, typically, is that the small business owner, and most of our business owners are, in fact, all of them are less than 5 million in revenue. Okay. So 500,000 to 5 million, we're in that range. We're not intentional with it. It just kind of like, well, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Blaine, I just want to grow. Okay, great. Well, tell me a business owner doesn't want to, really, that doesn't want to. All of us do. Okay, well, how's that going to affect profitability? And better than I do, honestly, probably, like the intentionality, the forecasting, the looking forward to see, that's fine. Let's plan for these type of things so that we can make course corrections along the way is super key to make that happen. And then you can look at your organizational efficiency and say, are we prepared for this? Are we prepared for this? Like if we add 5 new Blueprint members a month, okay, 60 a year, okay, we're prepared for that pace. I'm not prepared right now. Like even our own organization is not prepared to onboard 60 new members in our program a month. Right, we would have to build capacity to be able to do that, as just kind of an extreme example. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Following up on that, I want to tell me a little bit about your services. You sort of mentioned a little bit about the companies you serve, but tell me a little bit more detail. Who should be contacting you, and how do they get hold of you?
Yeah, so obviously bootstrapped entrepreneurs, right? So bootstrapped entrepreneurs, if you're in the $500,000 range, so you've got some traction in your business, got a little bit of, you've got some revenue coming in. We got a handful that are a little bit below that, but we work with established business owners doing $500,000 to $5 million in revenue that really want to upgrade their operating system so the business can really run on something outside of themselves. And so we primarily are with service-based business owners. We are agnostic to the industries because kind of what we teach, this organizational infrastructure, really is based on principles, not just on, and depending on the industry you're in, we have a lot of people in different industries. Sure, learn the skills of that industry, connect with, go to industry conferences, and even have a coach that is in that industry to help you get those nuances that you need. But the way we teach our organizational infrastructure really works for those businesses that have at least a couple full-time team members, up to usually about 25 team members is about where most people are.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Bradley, for being on the show. This was really, really interesting. And I encourage you guys, if you're looking for, if this connects with you, go check out Bradley at Blueprint OS. And also want to say, if you're looking for a way to forecast and manage your cash flow, and especially like not the rinse and repeat cash flow, but if you have uncertainty, if you have some irregularity, you have complexity in your cash flow, that's where we can really jump in and help you. So come and visit us at dryrun.com, and we'd love to see if we can help you out. Thanks again, Bradley. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Blaine. Appreciate you.